You embarrass me, Vivienne. Do you know that? Every time you walk into a room with me, I feel like I have to apologize for you. She didn't cry. Not then. She stood in the doorway of their master bathroom, still holding her mascara wand, and she looked at her husband's face in the mirror. He was straightening his tie. He didn't even turn around when he said it. Marcus. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. What did you just say to me? He turned then. Slowly. The way people turn when they've already decided the conversation isn't worth their full attention. I said you embarrass me. The Hartwell dinner's tonight. The most important event of my career, and you're going to show up looking like, he gestured at her vaguely. Like that. She was wearing a robe. She hadn't finished getting ready. I'm not dressed yet, she said. It's not just tonight. He picked up his watch from the dresser. The Rolex she had given him for their 5th anniversary, back when she still thought gifts could fill the silence between them. It's every time, Vivienne. You don't talk business. You don't know how to work a room. You stand in corners and smile at people like you're grateful to be there. He clicked the watch clasp shut. I've already arranged for Cassandra Holt to accompany me. She understands what tonight means. The name landed the way he meant it to. Cassandra Holt. 26 years old, a media consultant whose name appeared in business columns next to phrases like brilliant and rising star. The kind of woman who wore her ambition like a second skin. You're taking another woman to the Hartwell dinner, Vivienne said. It wasn't a question. I'm taking someone who won't make me look small. He met her eyes in the mirror for exactly 1 second. I want a separation, Vivienne. I've had the papers drawn up. My attorney will be in contact with yours Monday morning. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, shook it once, and put it on. I'd appreciate it if you were gone from the house by the end of the week. Then he walked out. The bedroom door didn't slam. That was somehow worse. It simply clicked shut, the way all the doors in their 6-year marriage had clicked shut. Quietly. Without drama. Without any acknowledgement that something irreplaceable had just broken. Vivienne stood very still for a long moment. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed. The mascara wand was still in her hand. She set it on the nightstand and looked at the wall. The wall she had painted herself, that specific shade of warm ivory Marcus had pointed to in a magazine and said he liked. She had spent an entire Saturday afternoon getting it exactly right while he played golf. He had never mentioned it again. She thought about all the walls, all the colors she had chosen because he pointed at pictures, all the dinner parties she had planned down to the last folded napkin, the ones he took credit for in conversation. We always do a good table, he'd say, reaching for his wine, and no one would know she'd spent 3 days sourcing the flowers, all the business trips she had rearranged her schedule around. All the conversations she had softened herself for, speaking in half volume so his voice could fill the room. 6 years. She had given this marriage 6 years of careful, quiet, invisible labor, and he had handed it back to her with papers. She sat there for a while, not crying, just sitting the way you sit when something enormous has happened and your body hasn't caught up to it yet. Then she stood up. She walked back to the mirror. The woman looking back at her had tired eyes and a half-done face and a robe with a small coffee stain on the left sleeve that she'd been meaning to treat for 2 weeks. She looked like someone who had been living on the edges of someone else's life for so long she had forgotten she used to have her own. Vivienne Ashworth pressed her fingertips against the cold glass of the mirror. You know exactly who you are, she said to her reflection. Her voice cracked on the last word and she let it crack. You built something. You built something real and it has nothing to do with him. She said it again and again until she believed it. Because it was true. What Marcus had never understood, what she had let him not understand, because keeping the peace had become its own full-time job, was that Vivienne Ashworth was not simply his wife. Before she had poured herself into the architecture of his ambitions, she had been the founder and creative director of Crestline Studio, a small but ferociously respected design firm she had started in her late 20s with a borrowed office space, 2 freelancers, and an almost reckless belief in her own eye. Crestline had grown quietly and seriously. They didn't chase trends. They built things that lasted. Brand identities, spaces, visual languages for companies that wanted to say something true about themselves. She had taken a step back when she married Marcus, handing day-to-day operations to her partner Felix, because Marcus had said he needed her present, available, a partner in his world. She had believed that was love. She had believed that was love. She had believed that was what 2 people building a life together looked like. Felix had kept the lights on. More than that, he had kept the fire burning. The firm had continued growing without her in the room every day. And there were moments when she would see a new Crestline project featured somewhere and feel a pang so sharp it frightened her. She had missed it every single day. She picked up her phone from the dresser, scrolled past Marcus's name, past the group chat for his colleagues' wives, past the calendar notifications for things that would no longer apply to her. She stopped on a name. Fletcher Ames. Not Marcus's business partner. Not someone who owed Marcus anything. Fletcher was an architect, an old friend from her early Crestline days, someone who had once spent an entire evening arguing with her about the ethics of designing spaces that excluded people and had made her feel, in that argument, more fully herself than she had in years of polished dinner party conversation. He had called her twice in the past month. She hadn't called back because Marcus had been in the room both times, and she hadn't wanted to explain the friendship to a man who turned every conversation about other men into a conversation about loyalty. She called him now. It rang once. Vivienne. His voice was immediately warm, immediately alert. "Hey, it's late. Are you okay?" She exhaled. "No," she said. "Not really." A pause. Not uncomfortable. The pause of someone who was giving her room. "What happened?" "Marcus is leaving me." She said it plainly. "He's taking someone else to the Hartwell dinner tonight, and he's had separation papers drawn up, and he told me to be out of the house by the end of the week." She paused. "He said I embarrass him." Silence on the other end. A long, slow silence. "Fletcher, I'm here," he said. His voice had changed. It was quieter now, the way voices go when someone is genuinely, carefully angry on your behalf. "I'm just a breath. Vivienne, that man has never deserved a single thing you gave him. Not one thing." She pressed her fingers to her eyes. I don't know what to do right now. I didn't know who to call." "You called right," Fletcher said. "Listen to me." His voice steadied. "The Hartwell dinner. You know it's at the Alderton Gallery tonight?" She did know. She'd helped Marcus prep for it for 3 weeks. She knew the guest list, the layout, the caterers. She had even quietly consulted on the event's design language 8 months ago when the Hartwell Foundation had reached out to Crestline for branding guidance. A project she had personally overseen. A project that no one at the dinner tonight, including her husband, knew she'd had anything to do with. "I know," she said. "Come tonight," Fletcher said. "Not for Marcus. Not to make a point. Come because you belong in that room more than anyone there. And you know it. Come because you've been making yourself small in spaces you helped build, and I'm tired of watching you do it." A pause. "I'll be there. I'll be at the door. Come." She was quiet for a moment. The house around her was very still. Marcus was already gone. The bedroom smelled like his cologne, and the particular kind of silence that follows a door closing for good. "Okay," she said. "Yeah?" "Yes." Her voice was different now. Clearer. "Give me an hour." She heard the relief in his exhale. "I'll be there, Vivienne. Take all the time you need, but come." She put down the phone. She stood in the center of the room she had decorated with the accumulated intentions of a marriage that had just ended, and she felt something she hadn't expected. Not grief. Not yet. Something more like the feeling of a window opening after a very long winter. She went to her closet. She moved through the hangars deliberately, past the safe choices, the ones she wore to Marcus's events because they were elegant without being distracting, because they complemented rather than competed, because they said, "I'm here," without saying, "Look at me." Her hand stopped near the back. There it was, a dress she had bought 18 months ago on a trip to New York, alone, during a conference for creative directors she had attended without telling Marcus, because she knew he would make her feel guilty for the 3 days away. She had walked past a boutique window and stopped. The dress was ivory silk with a subtle architectural structure at the shoulders, deceptively simple from a distance and breathtaking up close. The kind of piece that required a woman who knew who she was to wear it correctly. She had bought it on impulse. She had hidden it in the back of the closet with a vague intention she hadn't been ready to name. Tonight she was ready. She took it down and held it in front of herself. The fabric moved with a liquid quality. The structure was perfect. It was, she thought, possibly the most beautiful thing she owned, and she had kept it folded in the dark for a year and a half. She laid it on the bed. She went to the mirror. This time, she didn't hesitate. She worked with the focus and certainty of someone who had spent years building visual worlds for other people and was finally, deliberately, building one for herself. Foundation. The precise architecture of her features emerging. Eyes lined with care, color chosen for impact, her dark hair arranged in a way that was elegant and completely uncompromising. She slipped into the dress. The fit was exact, the kind of fit that doesn't happen by accident, that happens when a woman's body and a piece of clothing are simply right for each other, and neither one needs to apologize for it. She fastened the small gold earrings she had bought with the first check Crespline had ever earned. She had worn them the day she signed the lease on their first real office. She hadn't worn them in years. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. She did not recognize the woman looking back at her. And then she did. That was her. That had always been her. She had just spent 6 years practicing the art of being slightly less. She picked up her clutch. She didn't look around the bedroom again. She walked through the house, past the ivory walls and the folded napkins and the careful evidence of a life spent furnishing someone else's comfort. And she walked out the front door. The Alderton Gallery sat on the corner of Marchmont and Fifth, like something out of an era when buildings were still designed to make people feel something. Floor-to-ceiling glass on the ground level, warm bronze framing, the kind of interior lighting that turned every face golden. Vivienne knew the building. She had proposed the lighting concept herself during the Hartwell branding project. She had specified those exact bronze frames. She had never once thought she would walk through those doors feeling the way she felt tonight. Fletcher was there, exactly where he said he'd be, standing at the top of the entrance steps in a dark suit, watching the door with the focused attention of someone who has cleared their calendar for exactly this moment. When he saw her, he went very still. He came down 2 steps. His eyes moved over her face, the dress, her face again, and he shook his head slowly, the way people do when words come up short. "Vivienne," he said quietly. "Hi, Fletcher." "You." He stopped, pressed his lips together for a moment. "You look extraordinary." She smiled. Not the small, careful smile she had spent 6 years producing for Marcus's events. A real one. "Thank you for calling," she said. "Both times. Thank you for calling back." He offered his arm. "Ready?" "Yes," she said. "Actually, yes." They walked into the gallery together. She felt it the moment they crossed the threshold. The room was everything she had designed it to be, warm and open, the flow of the space guiding people naturally from the entrance toward the central gathering area. The lighting warming skin tones. The visual branding of the Hartwell Foundation anchoring every surface with a quiet confidence she had worked very hard to achieve. She had spent 3 weeks on that branding. The Hartwell people had called it transformative. Standing in it tonight felt like standing inside something she had made with her hands. Heads turned. Not all at once, not dramatically, but they turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. She caught the eye of a woman she didn't know who gave her the slow, appraising nod that women give each other when they recognize something real. A man she vaguely recognized from a design conference leaned toward the person beside him and said something she couldn't hear. She was not a guest in this room. She was Vivienne Ashworth. And this room knew it even if the people in it didn't yet. Across the gallery, near the bar, Marcus stood with Cassandra Holt. Cassandra was everything he had presumably wanted her to be. Young, sharp-featured, confident in a way that read from across the room. She was laughing at something Marcus had said, her hand briefly touching his arm. Marcus was not laughing. He was looking at Vivienne. She watched the exact moment it happened. The moment his glass stopped moving toward his mouth. The moment his expression shifted. Not gradually, not gracefully, but with the sudden, irreversible quality of a man realizing he has made an error he cannot correct. Because the woman walking through that gallery was not the woman he had spoken to in their bedroom 2 hours ago. Or rather, she was exactly that woman, but she was also everything she had always been that he had somehow, catastrophically failed to see. She was composed. She was magnetic without trying to be. She moved through the room as though she had drawn the floor plan herself, which, in a way, she had. Cassandra noticed Marcus's silence. She followed his gaze to Vivienne, and something shifted in her expression. A recalibration, because the woman she was looking at was not what she had expected from the story Marcus had told, the words like quiet and background, and not really suited to this world. What she saw instead was a woman who appeared to own the room simply by existing inside it, and Cassandra Holt, who was 26 and sharp and generally good at reading situations, began to quietly revise her understanding of the man standing next to her. Vivienne walked calmly through the crowd. Fletcher was beside her, steady and unhurried, and when she looked up at him once, briefly, he gave her a small nod that said everything it needed to say. She stopped when she was close enough. Marcus met her eyes. She held his gaze without blinking, without softening, without the reflexive small smile she had produced for him across rooms for 6 years. "Marcus," she said. Her voice was smooth and completely unhurried. "I spoke to my attorney this afternoon. I'll have a response to your filing ready by early next week." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. She turned slightly toward Cassandra. "I'm Vivienne," she said pleasantly. "I hope you enjoy the event. I'm particularly proud of the branding in the East Corridor. The typography was a challenge." She paused. "I designed it. Or rather, my firm did. The Hartwell Foundation brought us on 8 months ago." She let that land for a moment. "It was a good project." Cassandra looked at the East Corridor, looked back at Vivienne, then at Marcus. Something in her expression closed off. Fletcher stepped in then. He turned to Vivienne fully, and his voice was quiet enough that it was almost private. But the small circle of people that had drifted close enough to observe could hear him clearly. "I need to say something," he said. "I've wanted to say it for a while." He wasn't performing. That was what made it different. His voice had the unpolished texture of something that had been sitting in a person for a long time and was finally coming out because the moment was exactly right. "I've watched you be the most capable person in every room you've entered for as long as I've known you. I've watched you make yourself quieter than you are, smaller than you are, for a man who didn't want to understand what he was holding." He paused. "I don't want to be someone who watches from the side anymore. I want to be the person standing next to you when you walk into rooms like this one. If you'll let me try." The gallery was warm and the music was low and the people nearest them had gone quiet. Vivienne looked at Fletcher for a long moment. She thought about the phone call she hadn't returned twice. She thought about the argument years ago about design ethics and accessibility, about how she had driven home afterward feeling more like herself than she had in months. She thought about how he had answered on the first ring tonight and said you called right before she had even finished explaining. Yes, she said. It was simple. It was certain. I'd like that. She took his hand and they walked further into the gallery, into the warm light of the space she had helped build. Past the bronze frames she had specified and the typography she had sweated over in a small crest-lined conference room 8 months ago while her husband had been on a golf trip she'd asked him to reschedule once, just once, and he'd said the timing didn't work. Behind her, she heard Marcus set his glass down on a tray. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Cassandra Holt had taken a step back from Marcus. She was looking at him with the particular kind of quiet assessment that very perceptive people deploy when they are revising their opinion of someone in real time. After a moment, she reached into her clutch and produced a card. Not a note, just her business card, and placed it on the bar in front of him. "I'll find my own way home," she said. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was simply definitive. Good luck with the filing. She turned and walked toward the east corridor, where Vivienne's typography moved along the wall in clean, confident lines, and she stood there for a moment and read it, because it was worth reading. Marcus stood at the bar with a card he hadn't asked for and an empty space beside him that felt much larger than its actual dimensions. He looked toward the entrance of the gallery. He looked toward the east corridor. He looked toward the east corridor. He looked at the space where Vivienne had been standing. She was across the room now, laughing softly at something Fletcher had said, her ivory dress catching the light in a way that seemed, from where Marcus was standing, almost deliberate. Like the room had been designed to illuminate exactly this version of her. It had been, in a way. He understood that now. He understood a number of things now, that the understanding was entirely useless to him. He stood there for a long time. Long enough that the crowd thinned and the music changed and the waitstaff began moving through the room collecting glasses. Long enough that the particular quality of his stillness began to attract the occasional concerned glance from people who didn't know him well enough to ask. He had come to this dinner to be seen. He had not anticipated being this visible. The separation was finalized 6 weeks later. No contested clauses, no prolonged negotiation. Vivienne's attorney was precise and quick, and Vivienne herself had nothing to prove and nothing to punish, only a future to get to. She signed what needed signing and she returned full-time to Crestline. Felix met her at the door on her first official day back, with a coffee and a project folder and the look of a person who had been quietly confident for a long time that this day would eventually come. "The Carver Commission has been waiting for someone to make a decision," he said. "I'll take it," she said. She sat down at her desk, her real desk, the one in her actual office with her name on the door, and she felt the particular rightness of a person occupying the space that belongs to them. Fletcher asked her to dinner 3 weeks after that. Not a grand gesture. A text message that said, "I know a place with terrible lighting and extraordinary food, and I'd like to take you there if you're ready." She had laughed reading it, genuinely laughed, the kind that arrived without warning. She wrote back, "When?" They took their time. That was what she would say later when she thought about those months. They took their time, and not because they were cautious, but because the time itself was good. The long conversations. The arguments about design principles that nobody else wanted to have with her. The evenings where nothing was being performed for anyone, where she could fill a room with her actual voice at its actual volume. A year after the Hartwell dinner, Fletcher proposed on a Sunday morning in her Crestline office of all places, where she had been working through a proposal, and he had stopped by with breakfast, and then somehow the breakfast had gone cold and the proposal had been forgotten, and he had said simply, sitting across from her at her desk with the morning light coming through the windows, "I want to do this forever." All of it. The arguments and the projects and the terrible lighting restaurants. "I want you forever, Vivienne." She looked at him across the scattered paper of her real work and her real life, and she said yes before he had finished getting the ring out of his jacket pocket. They built something after that. Not a careful, managed, half-quiet life engineered around another person's comfort. Something real and loud and full of the particular joy of two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment. Crestline won its first National Design Award 18 months after Vivienne came back. She accepted it in a room full of people who knew exactly who she was, in a dress she had chosen for herself, with Fletcher in the fourth row looking at her like a man who has never once taken what he has for granted. Marcus heard about the award the way he heard about most things related to Vivienne now. Peripherally, from other people. Too late to mean anything. He had moved twice in the years since the separation. He was working with a new firm. A lateral move dressed up in language about fresh starts. People who knew both of them generally avoided the subject in his presence. He knew, in the way that people know things they cannot say out loud, that he had held something extraordinary in his hands for 6 years and had spent those years resenting it for being too quiet, too still, too modest, without ever understanding that the stillness was self-containment, that the modesty was a gift she'd been offering him, that the woman he had dismissed as background had been, the whole time, the most interesting person in every room they'd shared. He had asked her once to be less. She had never been anything but more. Vivienne Ashworth had never needed rescuing. She had simply needed one evening to stop being the version of herself that fit inside someone else's story, and to walk back into her own. She never forgot what that felt like. She never forgot the bronze light of the Alderton Gallery, or the way the room turned, or the sound of Fletcher's voice saying, "I want to be the person standing next to you," like it was the most straightforward thing in the world. She never forgot that the woman she had whispered courage to in a bathroom mirror, alone, on the worst evening of her marriage, had been real and whole and completely intact the entire time. She just needed the space to be found,